Good afternoon, everybody. This is Paul with CDP. We also have Brett Kligerman with CDP. We're both facilitating the webinar today. We're really excited to have all of you on the call, and we're really excited about the presentation today that we're going to have with the City of Durham. Just a couple of items for business. We have everybody on mute so that as we're doing the presentation, that we don't have any background noise or any interference. We have the ability for you to type in questions through your chat log. What we're going to do is hold those questions till the end of the presentation, and then we will go through the questions and answer as many of those questions as we can at that time. If you have problems with your audio or anything else, you can use the chat log as well to communicate with Brett and I, who can hopefully give you some advice through chat as to how to correct any issues you may have. So I think that's all of our laundry list items. Brett, was there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Nope, that was good, Paul. And if anybody wants to ask questions, in the control panel under GoToMeeting, there's a question module. You can go in there and just type your questions, and we'll hold them to the end. Okay, Paul.
All right. So we're really excited. City of Durham is one of our clients. The idea behind the webinar that we're doing today, we're creating a series of webinars. Sometimes we find it a little bit hard to articulate to our clients some of the great success stories that we have with some of our clients. And so we've launched into a series. We're going to have multiple customers presenting what they do, their business processes, and how they have brought multiple tools together. Included in those tool sets will be Primavera, and Primavera will be shown as how it integrates with other tools that they use within their business processes. And we just want the opportunity for our clients to learn from each other and let it come from the client to the client instead of CDP being out there carrying that message. So we're excited to have City of Durham with us today. We'd like any other clients that are interested in doing the same task to contact Brett or myself separately. We'd be glad to talk to you about how you can share your story and what you guys are doing as well. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Michael Hughes. He is the Assistant Engineering Manager at City of Durham. Also Scott Peruski, who is a Civil Engineer at City of Durham. And I'll turn it over to them and let them do a little brief introduction on City of Durham, and then we'll just dive right into it.
Hey, thanks, Paul and Brett. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Great. I'm Mike Hughes, and Scott?
Hi, everybody.
And we work for the City of Durham in the Public Works Department. We're just delighted to be able to share our deployment of Primavera with you, the audience, and we hope to give you your money's worth throughout the next hour. We've got more to talk about than we have time. And hence, this is part one. And things that we do not cover today, hopefully Paul will sign us back up to come along and deliver part two if we don't mess this up too bad. So thank you again very much. Our next slide is intended to tell the audience a little bit about what we do in the engineering division in the Department of Public Works. And we have 40 people, and we design improvements for streets, water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure that the city builds. This is not to be confused with private development that private developers build, but in the engineering division we design city improvements. We assemble many projects into contracts for economies of scale. Dwell a little bit more on that in a subsequent slide. And I will also say just preemptively that our terminology is a little bit different than perhaps Primavera's terminology when we talk about projects and contracts. So I just want to point that out. I'll try to be sensitive to it when we get into contract manager. And lastly, we bid and manage unit price construction contracts for all those following types that are on the screen, resurfacing all the way through downtown redevelopment. Who else in the city does similar design and construction? Well, we have two other major departments. Our water management department is in charge of the water and wastewater treatment plants, as well as sewer system and water system rehabilitation and major construction projects. And our general services department does all the vertical construction in the city of Durham. Between the three departments, Public Works, Water Management, and General Services, our contracting methods are very different. And I'm making the distinction because when we say the city of Durham has implemented Primavera, at the time being, it's only the Public Works Department has implemented Primavera. The other two departments are headed in that direction, and I think. But General Services favors CMAR contracts, Construction Manager at-Risk contracts, and Water Management uses consultants extensively for contract management, where in deference to Public Works, we do that in-house. The next slide is one of my favorite ones, and it reminds me of some of the first meetings that Paul and I had several years ago to plan our deployment. Our deployment is only 2 years old, but this kind of launched us. And I'm going to use the hand inside Adobe Acrobat to talk about the major components of the Primavera system. But as Paul represented to us, he handed this slide off, that Primavera is a project management system that consists of a data warehouse that allows for consistent process and team access to your teams. And we're showing our three major teams as these major highways going into the project management system. And it kind of starts with our contract management group, and we'll walk you through the process of how we got there or how we get there. But it begins with a contractor, this guy back here, doing his due diligence, setting up his project, scheduling P6, and supplying us the information that we need for contract manager. He fills his daily reports out. Our field inspectors approve the daily reports, and our inspection supervisor overlooked that whole process. At the end of the month, the contractor prepares his payment requisitions, goes through contract administration for approval. Over on the far side, we have our project management teams that consists of the engineering design group, the contract administration group, and the engineering services group. And in the core, we have our public works management, our director, my supervisor, the engineering manager, Ed Venable, and I'm that little green guy. The concept also was expanded beyond the base project management system to include links to 3 other data silos that we have in Durham that are very important to us. The GIS infrastructure management, and I will say this, we'll amplify on it more probably in part 2. I don't think we'll have time to get into how we leverage all of the feature set to import cost data to GIS, but we have the GIS system tightly coupled with Primavera through project IDs. And project ID is a unique key that exists in both worlds, so we pass data back and forth. It's also coupled with our Munis accounting system, and Munis is a brand name for software that does, I guess, ERP planning. Paul, correct me if I'm using those terms incorrectly, but it's the basis for which we create contracts and we pay contracts in the city. A little refresher for those of us who know Primavera. There are 3 separate modules, or there were at one time. I think the lines are becoming a little bit blurred, but the management dashboard is P6 Web, the contract management control center is Contract Manager, and engineering and contract planning and scheduling was intended to show the P6 client. And so the management dashboard is used by that central quarter in the very first slide that shows the warehouse for director and manager portfolio views, resource and project analysis. We pop out some spreadsheet views from there, and we have a pretty cool custom portal that gives management links to some other things, so they don't have to, guys like me don't have to fumble around with a keyboard. The contract manager is used clearly for our contractor management and contract administration, RFIs and meeting minutes, submittals and logs, and it really all begins with the daily reports in our world. And lastly, the P6 client is used for scheduling, resource management, reporting, and we do a little bit of forecasting and planning out of there. I want to talk to you a little bit through how we got there. The road, and there's kind of this funny name, Tobacco Road meets Technology Highway. I've been with the City of Durham since 2005, and in that interim we've seen sweeping changes. And it all began at the city website, which is intended to be right there. So I'm going to flip and go to full screen mode. So in deference to our process of a few years ago, we publish and distribute all of our construction contract administration through the city website, and you get there by going to Inside City Hall and come down to City Departments and go to the Department of Public Works. And on the main web page, if your screens will allow you, in the lower right-hand corner, there is a hot link to projects under construction. That same link is also up here under active construction projects. We also have a separate page for completed construction projects. So these are construction projects that are currently active in the Public Works Department, not to be confused with citywide. So our projects are organized by some major categories here. Our stimulus projects are right up front. General projects, resurfacing, sidewalks, stormwater, street. And keep in mind, this being the internet, that our citizens and city council use this tool also to take a look at the projects that we have outstanding and what is going on. I'm going to focus on contract ST-244 for today's webinar, and we're going to try to carry that theme consistently as we walk through the next 45 minutes, showing you how it's deployed inside Contract Manager. So it begins with publishing the drawing set and project manual, which is our new name for contract bid documents, on the city website. The construction plans are down here. We've got some addendum that are in here, plan holders, etc. The project goes out to bid, and we publish the bid tab on the city website for everybody to look at. A very transparent process. I had previously clicked into this, so please excuse my screen. It was being positioned in the lower left quadrant. But the bid tab looks like this. In the first column are our bid item numbers, a description, our estimated quantities on the streets that are in this project, the units of those estimated quantities, and the bid prices that came in from the contractors. So if I scroll across, you can see the bidders were Triangle Paving, Grading, Barnhill, and these are ordered left to right in increasing amounts. We'll see that at the bottom. Barnhill, Ellington, and so on. And I'm scrolling rather quickly just because we don't have that much time. And you can see we had a number of bidders. And scrolling to the bottom, through our bid categories, each one of those sections I just blew through, excuse my language, but we'll get back to that, are different types of entities within the project. So the high bidder was $849.5, and the low bidder all the way over here to the left was $432.295. And I'd be interested in hearing from the audience what your bid experiences have been. Ours are, we're getting wide spreads like that and very different pricing than we got a few years ago. Of note here, our construction drawings are also on the website, and our bidders pull these off the website and print them, so we no longer have to print them and sell them at the front desk, and it saves a lot of time, paper, and fuel. People don't have to drive here anymore. So I want to just show you what those construction drawings look like without downloading them. So I had this actually parked out there already. There are 13 sheets in this drawing set. You're looking at sheet 1, which is the cover sheet, and it looks like a classic civil engineering construction drawing set. So the first sheet is the index. This is a vicinity map, and then our plan and profile sheets follow. So allow me to minimize that. And let's go back to the slideshow. So I will minimize. Let me come down here to the webinar. Thanks, Scott. Scott is the key. I'm trying to talk and drive at the same time, and he's keeping me on the right track. So let me go on a little bit and tell you that in our deployment of Primavera, our discovery is that we have 3 different contract types that we are now managing inside the project management system, consisting of P6 and Project Manager. Type 1 is a contract like you just saw in ST-244. It is a contract that has anywhere from maybe even one, but usually 4 or 5 up to 14 or 16 projects. I'm going to actually move the mouse around. So it's got up to 14 projects in the contract. They're bundled for economies of scale. There's 100 and some pay items in the schedule of values. The contracts are usually in the multi-million-dollar amount. You can see that ST-244 was a $400,000 contract. The average project cost of these 14 projects is $435,000 in ST-227. The Type 2 contract is a resurfacing contract, and it's very different than this construction contract in that instead of being 14 projects, there's actually 200 to 300 to 400 to 500 different project locations, which are facility IDs in GIS, where we're going to be doing resurfacing. There's far fewer items in the schedule of values. The contract amounts vary greatly, but currently we've got $12 million worth of resurfacing that we're managing. And the average project cost, or cost per location, can be in the $10,000 to $20,000 kind of sort of range. And the third type of contract is a sidewalk repair contract or a curb ramp repair contract. And it's also like the Type 2. It has a whole number of project locations, limited number of pay items, but what distinguishes it is that the average project cost is in the $1,000 to $2,000 range. And one might say, well, why is that important? It becomes really important to our public and city council when we take that project cost per location of $2,000 or $22,000 and we push it back up into GIS and we try to answer questions that our citizens and council have about exactly where did you spend our money. So we could pop into GIS, we can show them where their money was spent, and then we can use the tools that are in GIS to answer it, well, how much money did we spend by Commissioner's District or PAC District or in the north side of town versus the south side of town. So it really facilitates the kind of research that people are asking of us in increasing ways these days. I want to give you a brief glimpse through these slides of what our project manager contract tree looks like, and those of you that use Contract Manager have seen it, but we have our core route and we have our projects organized by type: sidewalk, curb, ramp, street, water, sewer, resurfacing, etc. And then underneath there we have our contracts. Our contracts, I think in Contract Manager terminology, are projects in Contract Manager. So again, the distinction that our semantics are a little bit different than the native terminology. Well, what about this business of types? They look very, very different inside Contract Manager. A Type 1 contract, and what we've done is drill down in the control center a little bit, and we're looking at the committed contracts in a Type 1 contract. Tongue twister, huh? We're looking at the contracts inside a Type 1 contract. This is for a project known as WS81. It was a water sewer project. I couldn't flip this around quick enough for the presentation to show ST-244, but it looks pretty much the same. These are the project locations. Go down the list. And they have their own numbering system inside Contract Manager. And each one of these locations, which is now a separate committed contract in Contract Manager, has its own cost. So this lets us track the cost by what we call our projects at a very granular level within the schedule of values. The Type 2 and Type 3 contracts look very different. In the contract committed area, there's only one large contract. This is for ST-233, which is a street resurfacing contract. There's only one large contract in the contract committed for that City of Durham contract. We handle our granular reporting by facility ID. If you recall back to that previous slide I showed you where we have maybe 200, 300, 400 different facilities, we handle that a little bit differently in the Type 2 and Type 3. We will probably explore that more in Part 2 of Tobacco Road, not so much today.
Mike, this is Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Can you go back 2 slides for me 1 second?
Yes, I can.
So one thing I want everybody to understand that is very innovative, and what you have done here is that a lot of times, and you know through the testing that we did with you guys, somebody might look at the program S224 or the WS81 program, and you have all these different street projects, and somebody says, well, I can't use Contract Manager because I have lots of little projects. Because what they don't want to do is they don't want to take all of those items they see on your screen right there and go into Contract Manager and create projects for every one of those. So what I want everybody on the call to understand is that through your processes and through technology that we've implemented with you, what they're going to see today is how they can manage a group of projects inside of a project in Contract Manager and run that program instead of having to have all of these items as individual projects in Contract Manager.
Great point, Paul. And our learning curve is, we're still on the learning curve, and our initial deployments start out a little bit differently than this, but it's been a growing process. And thanks to all the help that you've provided.
Thank you.
Shall I go back to where we left off?
Yes.
Okay. So our cost worksheet for WS81 and our Type 1 contracts looks very much like this, where we've got our street costs associated with a unique cost code, water, sewer laterals, some non-distributed mobilization. This model fits with the city's assessment process for the things that we build. And those of you that are in the municipal environment probably are familiar with similar things. If there's any questions about that, we can answer them later. But this lets us have a different view, I think, as Paul and maybe the people at CDP say, a completely different view of the cost inside Contract Manager. So, having said that, I'm going to change gears a little bit and start to dive into how we use Primavera, and we're going to start doing some live stuff very soon. I'm going to hand the keyboard over to Scott, and he will do the driving in just a little bit. But let me say overall, there's 4 elements to our City of Durham, actually Public Works, Primavera workflow model. Excuse me, we have a setup phase. We'll dive into each of these phases subsequently, an execution phase, a daily report phase, and a payment phase. If we step into the setup phase a little bit, and please excuse these graphics, they're not nearly as crisp as we would like. In the setup phase, we have language in our contracts that require the contractor to use both tools, Contract Manager and P6, on our projects. And this is a little bit off course of some things that we've rehearsed with Paul. But if we go back to the city website and we look at the bid documents, we're going to see that we have PDFs out there that say to the contractors, or in this case a consultant in a request for qualifications, how they're to use Primavera. So I'm going to just scroll through here quickly. You guys in the audience can get to the website and page through such things. And we say in the scope, the firm selected for the project will be expected to make extensive use of the project management system. We describe that it consists of 2 modules, and then we say subsequent to the award, the selected firm will develop an over project schedule and utilize Contract Manager for the following tasks. And then to augment that, we have an attachment, and that's not the right one, excuse me. This is the right attachment that goes in the back end of our contract documents that talk about the contract and project management system, the requirements and workflow. And this describes to the contractors and consultants exactly how they need to create a project schedule, how they need to set up Contract Manager, and then the daily report workflow and approval process and so on that we're describing on the screen. Paul, do you have anything that you would want to add to that at that point?
No, I think that that's straightforward. I think that it might be prudent to to just explain how the contractor works in your environment.
10-4, and that's the direction we're heading.
Okay.
I've got an eye on the clock, and we've got about 30 minutes left in our hour, so we'll march down that path.
Great.
So after the consultant or contractor does their preliminary work, we enter the execution phase where we issue a notice to proceed for construction, and then we import into Contract Manager the projects for the contract. And this is really cool for those of you in the audience. It's something that we're real tickled with. It's called the SOV importer, Schedule of Values Importer. It was written for us by CDP, a consultant that works with CDP, leveraging the applications program interface of Contract Manager. And it does these separate steps that are on this cool slide, reading from left to right. It establishes project settings, it creates budgeted contracts and committed contracts, organizes a cost worksheet, builds a material log, and synchronizes payment requisitions all in one fell swoop. And Scott is actually going to show us how that works. But the heart of it is a spreadsheet, at least in this current version of the importer. So let's click back to ST244, and that is this project that we're going to now work with through the remainder of our hour. So the spreadsheet is set up using named ranges pretty extensively. There's a name range for the contract that sits up the budgeted contract inside Contract Manager, a name range for the cost codes, and let's look at that for a second. And the named range is highlighted on the screen. Paul, can you see that okay on your end?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, so the cost code 01 is street costs, 02 is water costs, and then the manifestation of that is down here just below it, where this is the schedule of values, and we've assigned a cost code to each line item, and it varies from top to bottom. The couple of the other really important name ranges are the schedule of values, which highlights that whole name range from top to bottom, starting with cost code, Contract Manager material name, item number, description, units, and unit cost. And this is the unit cost of the successful bidder, Triangle Grading and Paving, for the $400,000 contract. Looking over to the right, there's named ranges in here for each of the projects, and these are our projects, inside this contract ST244. So we've got a construction project on Red Oak Avenue, another one on South Park Drive, Swansea Street, and some neck downs. And this is really cool. In here, for Red Oak Avenue, we have our Munis cost codes for this particular item in the SOV, and they can vary project to project. And we've got our P6 activity codes. So the contractor has taken the spreadsheet, he's put in the estimated quantities for this project, he's defined his P6 activity codes, and then we come back and populate it with our Munis cost codes. And that, in essence, is the structure of the spreadsheet for the SOV importer. I'm going to hand the mouse over to Scott, and he's going to drive the importer while I talk a little bit. Thanks for the break, Scott. So we actually started this application up before the webinar, and the importer screen looks like this. It's got a URL going to our server, and let me say that our servers are sitting on the outside of our firewall, and they're accessible to the public. And you guys can see that we're using a non-standard port there. So the API interface is a little bit different than the regular interface in that the last token on the URL describes that we're going to use the API. Scott's going to log in here. So he's actually logging in live to our Contract Manager through the importer. And when he puts in the name, his user ID, password, and the group name that he wants to log into, he presses the login button. And if that's successful, then the project description opens up, and he can here create a new project or put an addendum on an existing project, and it's prompting him to please select a project for the template. And the key to this, in one way, is to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom, is that we build a template first that has the ST244 contractor information and contacts in it. So the template then is used to create each of the committed contracts and the budgeted contract. So the next step is to load the contract data from Excel, and then Scott is going to browse to the location where he's got the Excel spreadsheets for this contract. This was unrehearsed, so he's drilling in through our extensive folder system to ST244. These are the live folders, Primavera batch load. And so he's going to pull up the first spreadsheet. I didn't show you this one. It's kind of a key to what is in the second spreadsheet. So he's going to say open. And then he's going to hit the browse button for the contract details file and mash the next button. And so you can see in the headers here the named list for the range names. So this is keying off project data. You can see contract and cost codes, schedule values, and it's looking at the cost estimate sheet. So Scott's going to then type in a little bit different name. He's going to be called webinar as the project name, and test, and then he's going to load the project. And the next step reads the Excel spreadsheets and validates the data structure. And we're keeping our fingers crossed because this portion of the webinar was unrehearsed. We had a video that we wanted to show you, and the video didn't display. So we've loaded 4 contracts successfully. Scott presses OK. And the next step in the importer is to review the contracts and continue. And actually, each one of these steps is key, and that's why we wanted to show it to you in the webinar. So over here, he can choose which project to include in this batch load. He can unselect all. He can select all. Or he can turn on and off selected projects. So this allows the batch loader to load projects kind of incrementally. Down here it's got the contract relationship from vendor to vendor, and then we hit triangle paving and grading. We set the document date, which is really the contract date, to the date in which we issue the contract, and it could be as early as February 1st, and we're actually loading things today. We pull a prime contract from this company, and we can scroll through that and select other contacts if so desired. And then on the import settings, we can transfer the project settings from the template. New projects use group, vendors, and contacts, create material logs, and create the first payment requisition. So we're not going to hit import because we just don't want to do that in the webinar, but if we did, it would load the project into Contract Manager to initialize it. So I will minimize, I'm going to close this. We don't need to come back to it. I'm going to close this. So if we hit load, it does all these tasks for us. So I think, Scott, now what we want to do is go ahead and get into Contract Manager and show some of that work that's already been done for us. So Scott's flipping back to the browser, and we have some tabs pre-parked for Welcome to Contract Manager, and Scott's going to log in. Paul, anything to add?
No, I think you're doing a great job.
Thanks.
Walking through the process.
Okay, so we're in Contract Manager, and the first thing I'd like to point out to the audience that our group that we're in is called Pub Test. It is one of several groups that we have, and I just want to, it's a test environment that we use for webinars and for demoing things. So if I change group, I just want you guys to see the other groups that we have here. Our live data is in PubWorks database, and General Services is actually piloting an implementation off of that group right there. So I'm going to hit cancel and hand it back to Scott. Now what he's going to do is he's going to expand the tree whole placeholder in that node, and he's going to expand ST244. And then he's going to expand the ST244 street contract. And in theory, if we had just loaded this, this would have been completely pre-populated by the importer. However, what we've done for the purposes of the webinar is we've actually grabbed the live data. This is a live project, and we brought the live project in here so we can show you some of the next steps with daily reports and payment requisitions. So the first thing I want to take a look at is the contract information. And let's take a look at the budgeted contract real quickly. And we have a single budgeted contract for the total value amount. Scott, can you scroll over to the right a little bit? Maybe pull the slider so it's a little bit more direct. There we go. So the budget contract is $432,296.38, which is the amount of their bid. Let's go back to the control center. Let's take a look at the cost worksheet. So our cost worksheet looks very much like the cost worksheet in the PDF that I showed you for WS81, except it's different. This is for this contract. And again, you can see that our original budget is down there in the bottom. Scott's going to hover over it at $432,296. And if we had our columns set up correctly, you could see the job status today, but I don't want to go there right now. Let's go back to the control center, and let's go to the contracts committed, and we can see each of the 4 projects that are comprised inside of ST244. So there's a contract for Red Oak, South Park, Swansea, and Gregson Street. Scott, let's go back to the control center. This all begins with the daily reports in our workflow. So let's go back, Scott, to the webinar slides down here, and let's advance that. And let's advance that to the next slide. So we're entering part 2 of, or part 3, the daily report process of our workflow. You're good. So what this is intending to show is that the contractor inputs daily reports. He's doing that either from the job site or in the office. The contractor assigns ball in court to the city inspector that's inspecting that particular job. The city inspector approves the daily report or not. If not, he sends ball in court back to the contractor with some notes telling him what to fix. And if the city inspector approves it, then it goes on to the next step at the end of the month, which is the payment requisition process. So what we thought we would do is to just show you the daily reports and how they fit the payment requisition process. And then at the end of the month, lastly, the P6 schedule is automatically updated by the contractor for the approved payment requisition by the city. And you've got that same kind of workflow going on. So Scott, let's go back to Contract Manager. And let's go to the daily report log. Yikes. This is empty. Oh, so we don't have live data in here. This is just the project as it was made by the importer. Is that right? Scott's nodding yes. So I think we've skipped a step there internally between me and Scott. It's probably something he told me to do and I forgot. So Scott, let's go back to the control center and kind of recover from this. Go ahead and hit click. And let's change our group, and we'll go to the live group because I think this is really important and it's something that we want to show. Okay, we're going to change groups. We're going to go to our Public Works group, which is our live data. We'll say OK. And we will go to Streets, and we're just going to repeat that process that we did in the test group. We're going to go to Logs, and we'll hit Daily Reports. And I hope there's some in here. Whew, thank goodness. All right, guys. Sorry for the jokes on this end. So the daily reports are organized in this view by project. So you can see daily reports in there for Red Oak, for Swansea, and then if we hit the More button at the bottom, we can navigate through here and see more. Scott, since we're kind of off the chart here, let's take a look at a daily report in which you think there's some activity. Scott was the designer on one of these projects, His street was Red Oak. So what do you think we go back to your project?
Sure, sounds good.
So Scott's studying the list. He's trying to figure out. Scott's studying the list. He's trying to figure out one in which there's some activity. So on this particular day, they were cutting trees on Red Oak, and Scott's going to scroll through this and hit your mute. So, and these are the pay items from the schedule of values, and we've taken down one tree that is in the 4 to, I'm going to move the mouse around so we can point. We've taken down one tree that's in the 4 to 6 inch range, 6 trees in the 7 to 12, and so on down the list. So coming back to our process, that data was put in by the contractor, Ronnie Purnell, and the ball and court contact is our city inspector, Brad Jackson, and this just indicates, serves to indicate whether or not Brad has approved those. So keep in mind that these items are tied to the P6 schedule to an activity within it, and the activity ID was in the spreadsheet that we batch loaded. So at the end of the month, the next step is for the contractor to create a payment requisition. And I'm going to be very careful here because this is our live data. And the projects are shown here. All of the projects are shown in the payment requisition module. It's the way they're displayed by Contract Manager. So you can see that we have had payment requisitions for Swansea going back to August, October, November, December, January. Gregson Street hasn't started yet. This has only the seed payment requisition created by the importer. And Red Oak actually has some activity that started up in November. So I'm going to open that payment requisition for reading in protected mode. And we're waiting on the computer, but thank goodness it comes back. So it looks like a payment requisition you would expect it to. You can see here that it has been certified and approved for payment. We'll flip that so we condense it a little bit. We get a restatement of the contract and the actual to date here. And we get a summary on this particular requisition of how much was earned, billed to date, $1,050, what our retainage is, and the amount that we've certified for payment. So you can see that this is just really getting started. And if we drill down through here, we can see the individual items in the schedule values and what was requested for payment this period. And it looks like just surveying, construction stakeout, and in this line item, our contractors also provide us with as-built drawings, and that's actually a whole other topic for those of you that would be interested. Our as-built drawings come in totally digitally right now so that we can import them directly into GIS, all the line work for streets, water lines, sewer lines, and that. And if we open up one of these items, and I'll pick this one, what we should be able to see is the activity number in P6 that's associated with this. So this is going to the activity ID 81340 when we import it back to our P6 schedule. So I'm looking at the clock, it's about 2:45. The next thing that we would want to do to close this loop of Contract Manager and P6 is now go to P6. We'll open up that construction schedule and just have a look at the activities and how it's been cost loaded. So to that end, we have, I think I'll log out of here, Scott, and we will go to P6 client. And Scott's going to drive and he's going to log us in and open up that project. Now we're going into the client as opposed to the dashboard because there's still a few things that only the client will do, at least as far as my knowledge is. And one of those things is to actually establish the linkage between P6 and contract manager. So what Scott's doing right now is he's gone through the entire project, the EPS, and he's opening the project for ST244. And that should be the only project that we have open. And he's adjusting the screen a little bit. And he's going to scroll up and down through the activities until he finds Red Oak, which is right there. So we just came off of the Red Oak surveying, and it is tied to this particular activity, A1340. And I'm going to scroll our timeline over. So we're looking at A1340. It's Red Oak Mobilization and Survey. And Scott, where's our data date on here? Has it already been? It is back.
Just the vertical line coming down your screen.
Yeah, the data date of the is actually back here somewhere, I think, isn't it, Paul?
I think it's right there. That's that bolt. Oh, there it is. Yeah,
it's right
October.
there. Yeah. So the data date hasn't been moved, unfortunately. But it's here where the linkage to contract manager is set up, and I just want to show you how that linkage is done. Scott is going to drive, and he's going to go back to...
Let me just point out something real quick, just from a process standpoint, that they can see now in P6 how the Primavera P6 schedule has each of the smaller projects broken out as part of your bigger schedule, such that your P6, what we would call a P6 project, is really multiple projects in one, just like in Contract Manager. One project was a program that had multiple projects. So there's consistency in the methodology of how we've got CM and P6 set up, so that when we go to do the link that you're getting ready to show us, everything lines up.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think that was an important addition. Scott's going to go back to the projects, and he's on the project tab, and he's going to the tab to link it with Contract Manager, and he's going to click that tab. And so it's linking it to the group called PubWorks ST244 project. Now keep in mind that the naming difference here between what we call things, the ST244 project, which is our overall contract in the Contract Manager, and then we've got the login hardwired to always use Scott's name and password even when the contractor does the update of the costs. So Scott, if you could scroll over and we can take a look at the current budget, where we use this view to load data in. It's actually this column right here is actual, and I see what's happening is we're losing our let's not do this. Let's go back to the P6 web interface and kind of wrap up. It's 252. Let's wrap up with the overall view of all of the projects. So we're going to come in, and do you need to log out? You probably need to log out of the client.
I think he can be logged in both places without a problem.
All right. For I guess he got a jump start on his Paul.
He's good.
He's real good.
He's a master.
Yes. So now he's logging into P6 Web. We're going to take a look at ST244 from the dashboard. Let me just point out a couple of features. This is our custom portal, and it was from here that we wanted to launch the video of the import, but it wasn't playing over the webinar. But this is the manager's access. I'm going to go full screen to that. And so you can see here that we've got a link to project statistics to help one of our managers remember how to read the portal. We have videos that we have made in-house that teach contractors how to create daily reports and make payment requisitions, and that's the importer process. And we've got some other quick links down here in the quick links department. And another really cool feature is that we're leveraging Crystal Reports because we have it ubiquitously inside the City of Durham. It comes to us through ARC info with our GIS package. We're leveraging Crystal Reports to make some custom reports. I'm going to minimize this. I've got an eye on the clock. We're going to wrap, not minimize, but just close it a little bit. We're going to wrap up here in just a second, folks. This is affectionately called Ed's project portfolio. Ed is my manager. This is a list of projects that we're managing inside Contract Manager and P6. This is the ST244 contract. And if we read across, we can see that it's a Type 1 contract. The contractor is Triangle Painting and Grading. The original budget's $497, $139.95, and the job to date as of the last invoice is $118, $169, is 14% of complete. We've got the actual start date, the forecast finish date, and some other statistics over here. So the takeaway is that we're managing $21 million worth of work across a whole array of projects that are Type 1s, Type 2s, and Type 3s. And then there are some other elements of the P6 web interface that we use to analyze schedule performance and project health, and those are down below. What I'm going to like to do is go back to our webinar slides and just kind of wrap up for today and then open it up for questions. This is our very last slides. This shows a Crystal report that is an AIA form that we're making for ST244. And the significance of this is that within Contract Manager, each one of those contract committed has its own payment requisition for the activity in that committed contract. And keep in mind, those are our project locations. Well, what our contractors need to do is to, across that entire tree or list of our project sites, they need to combine all of the payment requisitions into a single application, and Scott wrote a Crystal report that does that. And so this browses all 5 of those projects in ST244, comes up with the total contract amount of all 5 projects, aggregates across all 5 the total work completed and stored to date, and provides all the backup through the schedule values for all 5 projects. So Paul, that is the end, I think, unless you want to
well, what we'll give you a brief thank you right now, but we're going to do some questions. We want to thank Mike and Scott both for their time in putting this presentation together and their time to present it to all you guys as clients. But at this opportunity, what we'd like to do, using either the question window that you have on your GoToMeeting webinar or in the chat log, if you have questions, if you will type those questions in, then Brett and I will pose the questions to our presenters and answer those questions, and then we'll wrap up after a short question and answer period. So
now we do have 2 questions, Paul.
Okay.
Okay, the first question is, how do contractors access the systems? Does the city provide license, or do they buy their own?
Great question. The city of the Department of Public Works, again to distinguish us from the City of Durham, the Department of Public Works and the City of Durham provides our contractors with their own license from a named license pool. So we've got a big block of licenses that Paul provided to us graciously, and from that big pool we let our contractors have named the license seats.
Do you have another question, Brett?
Yep, another question. Where exactly is that document about how to use the software located in the city website?
Okay, great. Let me see if I can steer us there. I'm going to go back to the city website. And y'all, this is where my computer might hang up, but let me just test this out. I'm going to go to the project manual. And Scott's giving me the thumbs up, but I'm actually a little bit reluctant to do that because I don't want to hang my box up for the webinar. But this is just unique to my particular box, y'all. It should work good for you. What I'm going to do is go back to a folder in our server farm for the contract documents. Right there? Contract.
I think, Mike, what they were just looking for is if you just point them to your URL.
Okay.
So that they can go drive there and pull the documents themselves.
Thanks, Paul. It's actually right here. This is it. It's the project manual in ST244, and I think it's Appendix E in the project manual.
So if you look at the top of his screen, folks, you can see the www address at durhamnorthcarolina.gov, departments, works, and then the document that Mike is pointing to. So that's on the screen right now, so if you want to make a notation or do a print screen of your screen, you'll have that web address, how to get to the section that we're looking at right now. Okay, I think we have a third question, Brett.
Yep, another question. What is the Durham website to review requirements for contractors?
Would that be the same location?
Yikes. We don't have a location that says where the requirements for what are the requirements for contractors. We have, within the city, there are other places to go. This describes the active bids and contracts, and if I click there, you can see all of the contracts that are out there for bidding right now. We do not have any out here, but the Water Management Department, for instance, does. And so they've got a request for proposals for some master plans for the water reclamation facilities. And I think what we'll find is within the RFPs or the project manuals themselves, there'll be specific requirements dependent upon the type of work that needs to be done.
So as opposed to some cities or some companies who may pre-qualify contractors, and then you're based on a pre-qualification, then you have the ability to bid, you have the qualifications in each project?
Correct. And I would say, though, that we do have pre-qualified firms for minority and disadvantaged businesses, and each of our contracts has substantial requirements to meet those goals to utilize minority and disadvantaged businesses in the city of Durham. It works very well. That's someplace else on the city website, and if somebody wants an answer to that, I'll need to, rather than tying us up here, I'd need to email that to you, Paul.
Okay.
Okay, I have one more question. What process did Durham use for developing and importing training videos?
Oh, great question. We have a pretty large toolkit, and without giving any endorsement to any particular product, we're using Camtasia to do screen captures and screen recordings, and it also does voice capture, and we can do voiceovers with it. And we also have the Adobe toolkits for making production videos. At the heart of that is Premiere Pro, but there's some other tools called Sound Booth and related things that we use in assembling the final video.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Sure.
That is the last question we have.
Right. So, guys, if you have any other questions, let's try and get them in right now. We'll wait just another few minutes here. Make sure we don't have any last-minute questions. And if we do not, then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar for today. And then, obviously, CDP and City of Durham can be available through email to answer any wrap-up questions at a later time. Don't see anything coming across on my side. Brett, do you see anything?
Nope, no more questions.
Okay. So what we'll do now is we'll again thank Mike and Scott for their time in putting this presentation together and their time today to share with you guys. Again, CDP is trying to have clients share their processes and best practices with each other. Mike and Scott will be back with us in a month to do a part 2 on their series. And if you guys are interested in sharing any of your best practices, we'd love to hear from you as well. So with that, we'll conclude today.